Okay. I guess I got the nod that the meeting's in process, so, welcome to the Monday BOCC. I guess we didn't have a 9 o'clock today, so we're headed right into our 10 o'clock, and it looks like building and planning is at the table, so go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. Wayne Nelson, Planning Manager, Building and Planning. So before you is called for public hearing for the surface mine ordinance, and it's actually in two parts. The first part being repeal and adoption of the permanent repeal of the interim controls, and then adoption of permanent controls. And then the second hearing would be on the related or corresponding sections of code related to the special uses and surface mine.
You know, I was listening to that in the planning commission, and there's not a ton of difference between the current temporary and the other. It's pretty similar.
Correct.
Yeah, I think, which is a good thing.
Correct.
Because people have been living under it.
As I recall, a highlight, probably at somewhat our request, was put in as much flexibility as you possibly can, put the burden on the examines manager, the permit examiner, or what, I'm missing the word.
Hearing examiner.
Hearings examiner, thank
Correct.
you.
So we wanted to establish an ordinance with, I'll say, a baseline of controls that'll largely make sense in all circumstances. And then on a case by case basis, depending on the location, the scope, the neighboring property uses, environmental constraints, what have you, it provides that flexibility that the hearing examiner can impose specific conditions related to that.
It's almost a certainty that every opening, every mine request will require a hearings examiner.
Absolutely. Yes.
Is that mandated, or it's just going to be?
It
the way
is,
life
there's exceptions built into it. For example, the stockpiling of what they're now called rehandling sites for dredge materials, things of that nature, or if it's in conjunction with the forest practices, there are exemptions built into the surface mine ordinance, but any new proposed surface mine will be subject to the hearing examiner.
Yeah, that was one of the concerns I did hear, and that was from the ports and stuff, making sure it didn't affect that they could still do their work. And I think they address that pretty well.
It's only been how long?
What, 1 year, as far as I recall.
Very good answer.
You got that done in 1 year, right? Yeah.
So we went to the interim regulations because there was a problem. And the rules and regulations weren't very clear, apparently, to resolve the problem of neighbors. I think it was on Lewis River Road somewhere. Is what we're doing solving that problem, or just simply laying out a process to resolve neighbors' concerns?
I'll say the broad solution to that is that previously under the county code, you could propose a surface mine anywhere in the county via the special use process. Under the proposed ordinance, the largest amendment or the change is that there's only predetermined areas that would be eligible for surface mining. Those are the remote areas, the forestry areas, or the ag lands in and around the ports, for example. But as far as the urban areas, the residential areas, commercial areas, there is no provision to provide a surface mine without the benefit of a change to the comprehensive plan. So yes, it did solve that,
Okay.
that issue.
All right, thanks.
And those neighbors were part of this last process within this last year that we've been working on, and seem satisfied, I guess content with the way that the ordinance shaped out.
And I think part of it was they felt that it was a surprise to them.
Yeah.
That all of a sudden there was this mine in the neighborhood
Correct.
proposed. And so now there's gonna be ample notice and, a hearing. So that there's ample notice, people understand what the rules are.
Yeah.
Whatever they come up with, the hearings examiner within the guidelines in the ordinance.
Hopefully it's a good compromise because we need some lines. We need some of that resource. And so, people need to have the ability to do that. We get rock from out of county, right? I mean, we don't, it's a tough thing. So some of that is needed, but it's making sure everybody can live with it.
I probably shouldn't say too much on this, but then again, I'm not such a smart person. The issue always is not my backyard, and your backyard is defined however you want to define your backyard. And when this first began, there was opportunity for somebody who was presenting a permit requirement, or he wanted to file a permit to turn a certain old mine into a new mine. Now, by old, I mean it was old. And the discussion soon became obvious that there was, let me restart that sentence. The folks really needed to sit, the mine proposal people in the neighborhood, and write down a set of rules, which at the time I looked at the interim mining ordinance, they would have been the same. But we could have had that resolved long ago if people just didn't throw the kitchen sink at it. It was clear when somebody doesn't want something that they'll immediately elicit all kinds of arguments. Well, you haven't considered the people in the Shenandoah Valley lately, have you? And you're like, no, I haven't. Therefore, and so it's really nice having this, but it's another example of government stepping in when really your neighbor approach ought to be something that I would encourage. Now, I know in this case, it probably isn't ever going to be a feasible thing, but we get neighbors fighting neighbors all the time. I'm just trying to encourage people to be decent to each other. If you don't want to hear loud music at 2 a.m, talk to your neighbor first. Anyhow, off soapbox.
That was it. We're just setting the hearing.
Yeah.
We were on the agenda and wanted to talk with the board. Thank you.
I think you've done good work moving that forward, so appreciate it.
Thank you.
Health and
Well,
Health-
actually,
There's
before
Judy.
before they leave, before we go on to the next one, I received communications this weekend from a client who's been actively sharing his concerns with getting a development done out on Carlin Loop. And he was happy. He said, finally, we've got resolution that he can live with. And he particularly gave kudos to Mr. Moss. And I promised him that we would acknowledge that and find out what the department has learned to avoid that in the future. Except I hope it doesn't mean that Mr. Moss will also be the building and planning director. We don't want that, but so Mike, was it a matter of listening to the concerns and letting them, yeah, okay. And I think so often in these land use disputes, I think property owners that feel either surprised. The big issue is they feel not listened to, and I mean, that's kind of why we have a special, a hearings examiner process to give ample opportunity for people to be heard. So,
Yeah, Mike Moss, Public Services Director. We had a chance to visit with that citizen last week. Susan was in the meeting with us, and he broke down a few process issues that he thought Public Works had, and he actually brought up some good points, especially on the inspection side and what days of the week we inspect. And if we were on site that day on one of his projects, it may have gone a little smoother. So we're making some changes in-house, and we're able to help him move forward with this project. So I'm glad he reached out to you guys. But it's mainly for our side is that we don't like citizens going directly to the commissioners unless they come to us first, but we understand they have the right to do that. So a lot of times we try to fix these in-house before they come to your way. So we do apologize on that side, but there's usually some compromises that we can reach as a group. It was to figure these projects out before they get too far down the road.
I will share that during one of several conversations he had with me, he finally did admit, well, I don't expect you to throw your staff under the bus. So, well, thank you, because we don't do that.
Correct.
We try not
Yeah,
to do that.
exactly. Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
directed him back and
Yeah.
had him.
But the reciprocal is not expected.
So I'm glad that one's resolved. So
Hopefully, yeah.
yeah, thanks.
So anyway, thank you. Sorry.
Nope, totally fine. Go ahead, Gina.
Hey, good morning. Gina James, Health and Human Services. We have one item on the agenda tomorrow that in relation to our consolidated contract with the Department of Health. This is amendment number 10 to the consolidated contract. This amendment is addressing 3 items. So the first item is in relation to the foundational public health services scope of work. And all they're doing on that one is updating the index title of it. So they have just added state fiscal year 24 to the index title of that scope of work. And that's the only change on that scope of work that they've done. The second item is in relation to the Group A scope of work. Group A, they're closing out the Group A for 2023. So they're removing $250 of unspent funds from the Group A line item in that scope of work. And then
I'm sorry, did you say $250?
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yep. So it's just a closeout from last year for that line. And then
Gina, I can never keep the A's and B's straight. You'd think after being 35 years in the classroom, I would, but A's and B's just still confuse me. Group A, water systems, are those the municipal water systems?
those are the 15 or more connections. It's typically your like campgrounds, schools, churches, those types of facilities.
Okay.
And then Group B is the smaller, about 3 to 14 connections to the water system. I have to look it up every time as well.
Okay, thanks.
So the third item this amendment is addressing is Group B, and they're adding this year's allocation of funding for Group B. So they're adding $25,230 for Group B. This funding is still relatively newer. It's been in place the last couple of years, and it allows us to have a 0 permit fee for Group B systems, and we're able to also do some water testing for those Group B systems as well. So this funding helps support some of that.
So Gina, again, we're getting money from the state to do their job for them, right? I mean, the state law says they are supposed to make sure these water systems are inspected and, examined. And the choice is either somebody from Olympia does it, or we've got folks who know the community and know the neighborhoods.
Yeah, we have relationships with the different facilities around here and get to work with them on a regular basis, and they'll reach out to us if they have any questions. And so it's worked out really well.
Oh, so just some incidental questions. If I'm dealing with a Group B, um, what, does a Group B get inspected annually by HHS?
It's not annually. I think the rule says, uh, it doesn't have a set determination. I think we try to do it once every 3 or 5 years. They are required to do testing annually though. So they're required to do coliform testing annually and nitrate testing once every 3 years
And
on their
that's
water
on the-
systems.
And that's something that the Group B people have to pay themselves. That
They did with this funding that we get through the consolidated contract. We offer the testing. We offer to pay for the testing through our office. They can come in and get water sample, the sample bottles, and we'll pay for the testing through this grant.
And if there's a Group C, a single exempt private well?
I've never heard it called Group C, but maybe.
Well, for my speech impairedness, how about calling it Group C for the moment?
Sure.
Okay. If Group C desired to have their water tested, could they avail themselves of this also?
We only have, this is specific to Group B systems at this time. We have had some discussions about maybe how to do that with Group C wells. And would maybe like to talk more about that. We actually kind of hinted a little bit at that with the Board of Health in some of our priority areas. So we've seen some private wells coming back with arsenic and some other things. And if we have funding available, it would be great to offer that to Group C wells as well.
Yeah, I'm trying to look for some consistency and trying to understand it.
Mhm.
In terms of the municipal supplies, does HHS inspect them?
No, I believe those much larger ones are all through the state.
And presumably those municipal entities get their, I mean, they pay for the testing, but in fact, they collect the money from the subscribers, right? From their clients.
I assume so, yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Yep. So that's all on that amendment. I'm happy to answer any other questions. I'll be prepared with some of that information tomorrow as well.
okay.
I had a quick miscellaneous item if I
Oh, just
could.
a second on that topic.
Mhm.
It's always a point of interest as how many Group A's and how many Group B's and just general stats like that I find helpful.
Okay, absolutely. Okay. I had a quick miscellaneous item as we're getting ready to start conversations with the state about our community development block grant, the new grant. They're starting conversations about the new grant process. We have a closeout, some housekeeping from last year's grant to do a closeout report. I'm going to send that report to the board. Just you can keep your eyes out for it in your email. It asks for the chairman's signature on it. But I'll send it to all of you. It's just to close out last year's grant. It gets tucked into our file with the state. I'll send that to all of you. Let me know if you have any questions on it. And then if everyone's okay with the chairman signing that, then we can get that submitted to the state. I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. So I'll send that out in an email.
Gina, is that grant, which one is the one where they've kind of added some language that looks like it may be possible to use the funds for a wider range of things? Is that community block one, or is it?
So there's two different community development block grants. The public services grant is the one that we utilize and work with CAP for Meals on Wheels. There's another community development block grant called the General Services Grant, and it's a little bit more broad. They've actually just, I think last week, posted information about that it's opening. And that one can be, the county can submit applications either on behalf of the county or other local entities to support different types of projects, like supporting community centers or different infrastructure type projects. I can send some more information out about that. It is a little bit more broad.
Yeah, I was just curious because I know you had talked about a couple contracts we've done and we've added language because they had broadened the scope and
Was that document recording fee language?
maybe that's where it was.
We did add in some of the document recording fee contracts are the ability to bill the state contract if it's appropriate to do so.
Okay, so
So we-
that's what it was. Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
okay. Thank you.
Public Works.
With your permission, I'm still stuck on the group ABC.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that leads me to ask Public Works with Pat Harbison leaving, what kind of plans are there? I assume Pat was a manager of our own systems. And maybe an update on that would be helpful.
So do you want the update on how we're divvying out his work first or after we go
How
through
you're
the
getting the
agenda?
work done, what your plans are. But you know, if I were you, I'd just say, well, that sounds like it's my boss that needs to
Is it
answer
his
that.
problem?
Yeah.
So I guess I can start with that. So as you are well aware, he had several projects. There are the community water and sewer systems that he was working with, diking districts and development review. So before he left, I sat down with him and one of the senior engineers, and between myself and the senior engineer, we divvied up his projects that he is working on with consultants to keep them moving. So we have all of those covered and we're going to keep those moving on track. The water sewer crew themselves currently are reporting to the Castle Rock Road Supervisor, and we made that change a while ago so that the day-to-day management of the crews is covered. And I am doing the day-to-day questions on the water system with the public and the setting up new services with some help for the financial side. Then for the diking districts, myself, the senior engineer and the younger engineer have divvied up those projects to keep their projects moving, and I will be attending those meetings until we find a replacement. Development review, I am about halfway through writing up an RFQ to go out to get a small engineering firm to help us with that, because with the other work on top, I will not have the time to be able to do development review and all of the other tasks that are on my plate. So we're looking at doing an as-needed engineer while we are in the job process search. The job was posted last week for his position and the other open position. We are working through, we have it posted on the American Public Works Association website. Indeed, we were working on getting it up on the American Society of Civil Engineers site to try and keep this moving so we have a good recruitment pool.
Okay, thank you. Questions on that? Do we ever, we don't aspire to be water and sewer providers, right? We do it because things fell onto us, right?
That is my understanding of how the majority of these came to us. I know that in the probably the 80s, we were more actively becoming water sewer providers. So that is where we're at. Our biggest systems are, of course, Riderwood and then Tootle are our two bigger systems, both for water and sewer.
Fortunately, we have a banking expert here. In the banking world, what's big banks gobble up smaller banks and that kind of thing. Once the little banks have made the inroads and all that, is that a concept we have here that should the Castle Rock water folks take over the Tootle? Do we ever think about that? Is there any value in doing that?
I don't know if we've ever talked to Castle Rock about taking over Tootle. I know there have been discussions in the past about Woodbrook Sewer going to Beacon Hill Water and Sewer District because they serve water out there. But that is not something that they were interested in taking over. So we also, when we were having the issues or the continuing drought issues at Riderwood, I know there were some conversations with Lewis County about Vader taking over Riderwood, and that never went anywhere either.
And you've had a pretty continual problem trying to get operators with all their proper certification.
Oh, right now we are fully staffed up with our operators.
First time in a long time.
In a long time.
You've got something to trade.
If I remember correctly, we had kind of an ongoing discussion with Beacon Hill on merging, and we were getting really close, and then they hired our utility guy.
Yes,
That put an end to the merger talks. It was like, what?
yes,
Yeah,
it did. And that
I
was
wouldn't have
about,
said no, but I-
yeah, that was
Oh, right
2014,
out
I
front.
believe.
2014.
Yeah,
that sounds-
13 or 14.
Yep. So,
How about the Camelot facility?
The Camelot facility, as far as I know, there's been no discussions on anyone taking that over. It would probably be closest to Beacon Hill or Castle Rock. So, but I don't believe there have been any discussions about that one being merged with any of the others.
the thing that we struggle with is the size of the number of customers that make it very difficult to keep it affordable.
Yes,
And right now we blend all of those customers in as a way of trying to keep the rates low, but you take some out, it makes it even more difficult. I mean, that's one of those struggling things. It would be very appropriate if Castle Rock decided to be ambitious and take over, eliminate some of the duplication of effort, particularly with water service, because they're supplying the water to begin with.
yes, they sell us the water.
But water lines are relatively inexpensive to extend. And if you look at some of the service maps, I think we had a map of the metropolitan service area, and I don't know if you notice that one little strip off to the west of Longview. That's the Longview service area for water service. They run a line all the way up Coal Creek Road.
Mhm.
And it's the sewer lines that are the really the expensive challenge. And it's
By the way,
it's a constant struggle because
yeah.
you just don't have the numbers to level out the costs.
I don't mean by my questions to imply that I know the answer, because I think it's consolidation has its pluses, economies of scale. It also has its vulnerabilities. As a package, I don't know what the answer is, but certainly the questions should be asked.
Okay,
Okay, so then we'll rewind and we'll go to our agenda items for this week. So we have a call for bids for our countywide overlay program with a bid opening date on May 22nd. We have an engineer's estimate of $2 million for the overlay program. It's our annual program. So it's a bigger program this year. And then we have,
You
Our-
said that would be, that's a bigger amount?
it's bigger amount. We usually do 1 million. We're doing 2 this year. So then we have our bid award for the Eric Creek Fish Passage Project. This project, we opened it several weeks ago, and because it has federal money in it, actually, this is 100% federal funds. We had disadvantaged business enterprise requirements, so we received 7 bids. The engineer's estimate for this project was $1,727,748. We received 2 bids below that amount, but we are rejecting those 2 bids as non-responsive because they did not include all of the disadvantaged business enterprise paperwork that is required as part of these projects. One had a incomplete form that was deemed by us and reviewed and concurred to by WashDOT as being incomplete. And then the other lower bidder had a disadvantaged business enterprise included that is no longer a certified disadvantaged business enterprise. So that one was also rejected. So we moved on to the third bidder, which is Active Construction, with a bid of $1,913,913. And so we are recommending award to the lowest responsive bidder in that $1.9 million range.
Are they locally based or Clark County or?
I believe they're somewhere north of here. I will have that information
of
for you
here.
tomorrow. North of here, I believe they're one of the contractors north of here. Now bidder 3, 4, and 5 ranged from 1.91. The next was 1.93. And then the bidder after that was 1.98. So those 3 bids in the middle were clustered extremely close. We have not worked with Active in recent memory, but the next 2 lowest bidders we have, and on those 2 projects, working with those 2 contractors, we had minimal change orders. So we're anticipating that this bid is, I would say, pretty close to what the project's going to cost unless we find some unexpected items out there.
So I don't know how to approach this. Um, can we do a full cost analysis on each of the bids, absent considerations for intangibles that are politically driven?
I guess I would, my response to that would be, what would you be looking for in a cost analysis? Like they bid 35 and they bid 40 on a cubic yard of rock, or?
I'll do something ridiculous. It says, this person bid, or this entity bid $1,000, but they did not meet the disadvantaged business criteria. The only disadvantaged business criteria they was met was by this other outfit that said they will do it for $180,000. At some point, I think we would be imbeciles to accept a $180,000 contract in that basis. So I'm trying to find out if it were 100,000, if it were 50, if it were 2,000, where do we call that line?
I can certainly go through and do a review of all the bids. We do look at them to make sure nothing is unbalanced. That is part of our initial review before we recommend approval, and nothing appeared unbalanced, but I could go and give it a more thorough review.
How much is disadvantaged status an advantage?
What is the percentage that was required? Is this on this bid?
Right. So I mentioned $1,000. What is it? What's the allowance that would bring it up to what number for a disadvantage?
Let me look and see if it's on this paperwork. I didn't bring my spec book with me.
Be careful, I can make her do arithmetic in public.
I do not have that it was, because it's usually a percentage of your bid contract. I don't know if this one was a 10%. A 10 is not uncommon, 10% of your bid price to be done by disadvantaged business enterprises. And there is no requirement that it all has to be done by one disadvantaged business enterprise. It's your choice. You're the contractor. It can be done by one, or it can be done by 20 disadvantaged business enterprises. The main requirement is that they do a commercially useful function. So that they are actually doing the work and it is a requirement of the project. A lot of times they use flaggers. There are at least two disadvantaged business enterprises that are flagging companies. So a lot of times those are what these companies use. There's also at least one drilling company and a concrete company that I can think of off the top of my head that have been used as disadvantaged business enterprises. And those are on a list maintained by the state. And it is not something that we look at and approve who is and who isn't. We are just given a number, a percentage number that we have to check their paperwork at the beginning, that they're meeting it. During the process, the inspectors have to do interviews with each contractor to make sure that person is really working for the disadvantaged business enterprise and that they are doing a commercially useful function. There is also in this contract, which is paperwork for us, a training requirement that we also have to interview the trainees and make sure they're doing work that is spelled out in their training program. And at the end of the project for the disadvantaged business enterprises, I skipped a step too. If at the end of the project, they don't meet their requirement, they have to show that they made a good faith effort to meet their requirement. Let's say we thought the job was going to take 40 days and this was a super duper contractor and he did it in 20 days. So he lost 20 days of his flagger. So his disadvantaged business enterprise number went way down because of that. Then you'd have to show that. Also, during the contract, we have to make sure that they're doing prompt pay. All of the disadvantaged business enterprises enter into a computer system that they are, for the month of August, they sent a bill to the contractor for $2,000. And so when our check is cut for the work for August, the contractor has 14 days, I believe is the number, to pay their subs, and it's supposed to be logged in the system. We have to check and verify that that is occurring.
And how do we define a disadvantage? And I think your answer from your perspective is somebody hands us a piece of paper and says, these are the outfit names, see if you can match one up on your bid.
Yes.
Do you know how you make it onto that list? I mean, can we put Cowlitz County on that list?
No, do not believe so. I can get,
Greatly disadvantaged, you know.
I know, but I could get you I can bring that list of what our DBE, what you're required to have to get on the state's list.
So generally, at least in the past, it was either minority owned or woman owned. Has there
I'm
been,
sorry,
have
or
they
what?
changed that? Or owned by women?
Women owned. So
Has that changed at all, that you still have those two categories?
I believe they still have those two categories, and then there's underutilized businesses. There's a whole range of items that we,
But it's
work at.
based on minority owned or women owned, okay. I remember once years ago, we had a contractor working on a road project in the city of Longview that actually went belly up, and the staff it had been a kind of a problematic company that always right on the edge of not performing adequately. And they ended up not being able to complete the job. He had to bring somebody else. And I was commenting to our attorney and said, well, this is good news because now they're no longer a responsible bidder because they haven't, they couldn't complete. And he looked at me and he said, oh, Dennis, you don't really understand. he said, I predict that the next time we go out for bid for a project, the name of the company will have been changed and
Mhm.
Mrs. will be the president of the company and we'll have to give them extra credit. And that's exactly what happened. And it was disappointing to say the least. And
It's even nastier than that. My understanding is we were being sued by one company that we were trying to sue them because they weren't doing the right job. I'm using the term sued kind of loosely. And they were bidding on another contract that we had active, and we weren't allowed to say, how can we award a contract to somebody who's already caused us problems? And the answer is, you cannot withhold. And so the general term of blackballing a company doesn't seem to apply. So, you know, the old old adage, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, shame, or the other way around, shame on you.
Well, I mean, it just makes it even more important for our public works staff to be on top of the job in terms of watching and
Mhm.
overseeing, making sure. And that might raise costs for overseeing from staff's point of view, but it's better than having the project go belly up.
And I think that's important, and why I'm going down this path is for, hopefully the public will take a look at this sometime and realize that when the board presents them the cost of something that they know should be $100 and it's costing us $275, here's the answer. We don't care about who can perform the job best. We've got political favors to play. And on top of that, because we have to play the politics, the staff has to work extra hard to figure out who's doing what, when, and where. It's not,
Yeah.
it's not good.
It's a broken system when you don't get jobs based on how you perform, you get it based on what box you check.
I
And
ha-
I'm not
Yeah,
blaming you guys. I know that's the world you work in, it's the world we work in. I just think that's broken.
I have worked with a firm, it was a design firm, who started off as a DBE and they were so good, they worked themselves out of it. But they continued to be successful. It was a landscape architectural firm that I worked with and they worked themselves out of the program, and that was the original intent of the program, was to give them a fair footing at the start. And if they did good work, they'd move up and they could do it. But then others just, they're like, well, I'm just going to stay this size so I am guaranteed work.
Yeah, the dollar amounts I was asking for comparison, it's just so that we can present it to the public.
Mhm.
Public is largely oblivious. They may hear it once, they know that there's some minority, something, this or that, but they don't really understand the full impact on their own pocketbook and on their own future. And hence, who do they blame? Well, that damn public works people, they're so incompetent, you know, that
Mhm.
everything costs twice as much. I don't like that.
Yeah.
And the way to combat that is with proper information.
Well, we saw that last year when they took on a culvert project that initially had bid out. And then we took it on and did it for a lot less money, much more efficiently, but we can't do that all the time. Otherwise we get in trouble from the state. Makes zero sense,
Mm.
but you know,
So,
so what Commissioner's saying, it does have a cost. There's a cost there.
yeah. And if we could find out what the cost is, and I don't, that's a thing for the board because it's strictly politics. If we were not bound, this would have cost us $1,000, but because we are bound, it's costing us $2,395. How many senior engineers are there
In Public Works,
in our public?
yeah,
works?
we currently have 2.
Is that a number that is prescribed by law or?
No, it is just purely our classification of what they are, what their job classification is.
Would you be happier if you had additional senior engineers?
Would always be happy to have more senior engineers.
Okay.
But can you get them for what we're offering?
That is the question. I will let you know in a month and a half, 2 months, because,
Dennis, stop asking those embarrassing questions.
Well, one of these positions we've had open for
years.
years.
Um,
We've only had a few applicants for that in the years it's been open.
And the one that was the most qualified, we called him back to offer him the job. He goes, sorry, I just took another job. So that has happened to us.
Is there an exclusion for over the hill guys?
No, those, the senior engineers are the over the hill guys, if you want to call
But
it
I
that.
mean, over the hill guys.
Are you wondering if we're in a protected class somewhere?
I'm wondering if I can apply for the job.
Do you have a license to practice civil engineering in the state of Washington, or can you get one in 6 months?
I'm authorized. You're not allowed to ask me more details.
Well, you said you'd let us know in a month and a half. That means the engineer comes on board, if you're lucky, by July.
Yes, I'm lucky,
and-
July.
And the construction season's almost over with, right?
Yes. So that is why one of the senior engineers and myself took on Patrick's projects to keep them moving.
To make sure they're going, but
Make sure they go because there's ARPA money involved and we don't want them to fall by the wayside.
Trust me, this has been a very big discussion with our management team of how to protect our engineer and our other senior staff from maybe bailing down the road because of the workload. It is a concern of ours. We want Susan to be here till she retires, and to do that is with additional staff to help her out, because if we lose one, where's that workload go? Like we lost with Patrick, it's gonna fall on, unfortunately, Susan's lap. So that's why the RFQ for helping us with development review and maybe other things down the road to take things away from her, maybe in the diking side, look at help on that side. So she's not attending all these meetings and being overseeing all these diking districts. So we're having those discussions to try to help out. That's why we're looking at a headhunter to help us out with the engineering's applicant or openings, just to make sure we get some people on the applicant pool. So thanks.
I guess it would be a very successful solution if for once we might be able to hire an engineer from the city of Longview. Seems to always go to other places, but we'll see.
Okay, anything else?
No, we don't have anything else unless you had
Did you
something
have
for
any-
us.
No agenda items? I'll touch base on meeting on Friday, just so you guys are up to speed. We met with Darren from Conservation District and of course Susan and Mike were out there. And where it ended, it's a big issue there. It's bigger than I think. It almost sounded like Darren was more, when I look at it, I'm concerned about the road and the property owner there, but it almost sounded like Darren was more concerned the way the water was flowing with the property owner on the river side of the road directly in front, because it looks like a rock shelf that maybe was there before they piled all the dredge spoils on, and then it's eating that away into his or her property. I don't know who owns that, but where it ended up is well, I think there's a couple of, but one of them would involve one of you guys. Where it ended up, I asked Darren if he could kind of give us just a schematic of what could be done and kind of a cost estimate, so you could look at it. And then I asked Susan if you could do the same on an alternate road into that, kind of a design and a cost estimate, so we can kind of look at, do we want to abandon that section of road and go a different route, or do we want to try and fix it or whatnot? So that's kind of where that was at. The other option, which I thought was very good, is on the other side, we own that property too, and there's a channel there. We just
On
need
the
to-
other side, across from LT1?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's a channel there, and if we could open that up, it would change the river, but I think it involves some dynamite and somebody pushing a button in the middle of the night. And I volunteered one of you guys because you're short timers.
That's good.
But that would settle it real quick, but somebody might be in trouble for that. So anybody's listening, that's just a joke. We're really looking at, which would be really, it sounds to me, just listening to Darren, very extensive work, probably gonna be hugely expensive. And then, so we'll just have a couple options to look at and figure what we want to do. I know the property owner, where it's eating away his property right now and take to the road, if we were to buy it, he'd sell it in a heartbeat. So I know he's concerned about it.
Selling it in a heartbeat is, doesn't suggest a cheap price though, does it?
Yeah. I'm sure.
So,
But, you know, one of the questions to Darren, because everybody wants to dredge, but we've been working on permits for that forever. I said, how much longer on this side? And he said, well, basically, if you had one good rain event, it could take the rest of that out. So it's, you know, if we had something happen next winter, that it's possible, the way that, as loose as that sand is, that it could impact that right then.
are we, I get spatially challenged. Are we on the east side of the river at that point? That you're talking about? LT1 is on the west side.
Right.
Okay.
And that's where the erosion's happening.
And it's
Right,
happening.
right before you enter the gate to the shooting range.
Right, and a little to the south of that, I've gone and looked at some properties and, they're losing good land
Yeah.
fairly quickly. That's the area we're
That's
talking
the
about.
area we're talking about. And so, Darren talking about a rock wall, did he call it a rock wall to deflect some on each end? And, but he said it would be expensive and they'd probably make you take it out after a certain period of time, but I said, well, if you can at least kind of give us a schematic and a rough
Yeah.
estimate.
So could you go through what our choices are to try to remediate, including, the one choice that says you just sit and watch it?
Yeah, one choice is you just, you let it go and you work around it. You bring the road in from another area, which, Susan has said she'll give us some idea on that. We tried through the Warehouser
Right.
property and they wouldn't allow that, but there's a section off of Burma Road that she could, look at acquiring some easement and coming through that way and making those people would have access, and then you just kind of let it go. The other option is, he called it, kind of rock wall deflectors to try and deflect some of that off. The best solution is dredging out the other side and redirecting the river, but that, unless you want dynamite in the middle of the night, that's probably not gonna happen.
So what's on the table for us? I mean, at the moment, all we're gonna do is sit and observe, right?
Well, I think that on the table for it, at some point in time, we're gonna have to take some kind of action, and I don't know which, just trying to give the most cost-effective way to do it. I think we also, and I sent a note off to David Hodges, because I think, yeah, I haven't worked with the Army Corps for a long time, but it's become pretty apparent when we were back there that they're gonna do what they're charged, what they've been congressionally mandated to do. And that is flood levels and levees. And that's what they're gonna do. So unless you can convince Congress to try and amend that mandate or that expectation, getting the machine in the water, unless you're doing it illegally, is gonna be almost impossible. And we don't have the time to go through that permit process anyway. The road's gonna be gone.
So it's actually a pretty complex issue in the sense of the government gets involved in a lot of things, trying to fight nature, Mother Earth, is always one where you want to do giving it very careful thought. So you think about what it is you're trying to save. And it may be that that gentleman says, yeah, I'll sell you my property. I don't see this stopping it. Maybe you let things go the way they're going to go. There's a price associated with that. Government has tended to buy people out, and I'm not sure that's a defensible position. I think government should look at what is in the interest of the community, and whether your house blows up or not is really of no interest
Right,
to the community.
yeah.
Yeah.
If we do nothing, and you guys, please correct me if I heard this wrong, but it really sounds like two houses are in peril there. If we do nothing, because he was concerned, seemed to be very concerned about the one on the river side of the road. And then the one on the other side, it'll just keep eating away.
Do we have a legal responsibility to save those houses?
I would not be able to answer, do we have a legal responsibility to save a house? Because that's really a building and planning. Mine is more of a, do we have a legal responsibility to provide access?
Well, access, yeah.
So
I get that.
access would be my concern, and that's why I would be looking at an alternate route to get them to their homes and to provide access to the gun range. So
I understand that.
Easy
It's-
questions, right?
Yeah.
It's not like we have caused a problem. That's so.
No,
um,
it's not a problem
They're,
we've
they're
we've
at, they're at
caused.
risk of losing a house
Right.
like happened 40 years ago when those houses all got washed away.
I think really where we get involved is because I think we need to have legal access to the properties, and that's kind of where we're coming from. Can we save what we have now, or do we go from another direction? I think that's really the question for us.
I wish there were an opportunity to get FEMA a little bit more proactive, but FEMA tends to just simply be reactive. You got to have the damage first, and then they'll come up with strategies. Because they've shown in the past, they've been creative in solving the problem after it's happened, but
they do have a newer grant program that's called Building Resilient Infrastructures and Communities, but it's a very small pot of money. And it's to do these types of projects where you see something that you think is going to fail in the next 5 to 20 years. What can you do to remedy that? But I don't know if we would ever be able to meet the timeline with this location. It's more like a frequently flooded area that you can come up with an idea. But this is the type of project I think that they're looking for in that program. But it's nationwide, and it's like, 100 million. So that's what, 20 million per state. It's not much money.
I think the lower Westover Creek area had some remediation where houses were lifted up and built to avoid the rather regular flood
Yeah, I know.
that occurs.
Definitely some of the houses on Alpha were raised, and I know that at least one was bought out in that area.
That's a
Hey.
little bit different. That's a different type of a situation
Mhm.
than this erosion event.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I view this section as just a symptom. This is just one section of the river. You can find Castle Rock's dealing with the erosion of their fairground property. I mean, you could find spots, the conservation group is working with other spots on the river to try to shore up stuff. I mean, there's a lot of stuff.
Well, I think the city of Kelso is struggling with their rainy well system, getting them adequate water. I think there are times when they buy water from Longview currently to meet the needs, usually in the August, September timeframe, but
It's not like there's even a clean separation between practices. Like the conservation district I've liked and I've supported because they do things nicely, constructively, economically. But they're involved in saving people's property. And it's sometimes couched in the argument it's for the fish. And I don't know what, sometimes you turn a blind eye to arguments. So we have interceded to help people save their property. The Camp Kalama is an example. The golf course on the Lewis River is an example. And I'm sure there are half a dozen others.
Yeah. And hindsight is, always 20/20 and if you look back, it probably wasn't the best decision to let people start building homes on sand.
Yeah. It's, it's a question that, should people have make the implicit assumption that the government will bail them out? I tell the story of when I first moved up here, there was this place right on the Kalama River, and the backyard of the house was the river. But it was a slope such that I could picture we'd get flooded out. So this two-story house was really a one-story house because you dare not use the lower one. And a beautiful house and everything. And I decided that I wasn't going to buy it just because I said my dad he would call me an idiot, and that would always be painful.
Yeah. So anyway, we're trying to gather some information so
Yeah.
you can all see it. And nothing's going to be easy or cheap.
I like
but-
asking about this just because it takes me a long time to sort of put perspectives on things.
Yeah. The other, as a miscellaneous, it doesn't involve these guys, is the Longview City Council on Thursday. I spent 30 minutes with them. The topics they sent me, they wanted to talk about wasn't the topic they ended up talking about. It came up to a 30-minute conversation on severe weather support shelter because the one group isn't going to do it anymore, an option. So it was just a conversation. I was upfront with them at the beginning that I have no authority or anything to make commitments or any of that type of thing, but I'm always more than happy to give you my thoughts. I think that those kind of interactions, I don't have a problem with. I was okay doing it and we just had a normal conversation. It wasn't on what I thought they wanted to talk about, but that was fine. It went 30 minutes and then they got on with their meeting, which went till after 11.
Did they talk to you about the dock recording fees at all?
No. And they had a long discussion on that, and we've taken the position here before, that we'll support whatever they want to do.
Right.
They made the decision to go back with the county.
That decision has been made?
Yeah, they voted on it. So I don't, know how that all works, but they are not disbanding their task force, but they will redirect some of the things that it looks at.
They've got two council members on the homeless housing task force.
On the county one, right?
Yeah.
The separate task force they have, they're gonna keep that, but they're redirecting some of the work it does.
Hmm.
It was a I won't call it chaotic, it was boisterous, however you say that. It was full of opinions,
Mhm.
but I thought the 30 minutes I spent, they didn't have time to open it up to questions, so there wasn't any audience questions, but just the interaction. I think if a city invites any one of us, that's perfectly fine to do that. And I go to most city council meetings anyway, so. Anything else? Jessica said she has nothing at 11. So
So we're done.
we're done. So we will adjourn. Thank you.
Right.